Hello everyone, Zaid from Z Security here. In today's video, we're gonna disclose a very dangerous backdoor that is shipped with millions of routers and repeaters around the world, particularly wavlink and jetstream, some of which are actually being sold by Walmart, which is a huge retailer in the United States. These backdoors allow hackers to gain full control. They get root access to this router remotely. This allows them to use these routers as pivots to first of all spy on all of the connected clients, allowing the hackers to see usernames, passwords, traffic, or anything that the users do, intercept it and modify it as I show in my courses and as we're gonna talk in the video. And it also allows hackers to discover all of the networks around this hacked router and potentially hack them and hack the clients connected to it. And because there are millions of these routers sold, you can imagine the severity of this weakness. We're going to be discussing this with the guys that actually discovered these vulnerabilities. So this will help you guys understand how to go about discovering such vulnerabilities and disclosing them to the public properly. And you'll get into the mind frame of a hacker and the tests that they have to do in order to discover and exploit such weaknesses. Then at the end of the video, we're going to show you how to actually test if a router is vulnerable and hack it remotely. So we're going to have Roni, one of the researchers, hacking into James's router that is used on his house, and you'll see how he's able to become the man in the middle and spy on all of the data. And like I said, this is just a simple example. In the video, we're going to talk about more. This might be a long video, but you can use the timestamps in the description and on the time bar to skip through it to whatever that's interesting to you. I hope you find the video useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to stay updated with the latest in cybersecurity. So hello and welcome guys. Thanks for taking the time for this call, and thanks for your time to actually discover these vulnerabilities that actually help people be more secure. So we have Mantas, James, and Lupin. These are the three researchers that discovered the weaknesses and vulnerabilities that we're going to talk about. I'm not going to tell you what they did. I'll just let them explain their role briefly, and then we'll actually discuss everything in more details. So I leave it with James.
Yeah, so I did pretty much the initial discovery, bought the first router, found the first vulnerabilities, and then I the remote code execution plus being able to find the password, all the fun stuff.
I'm Roni, also known as Lupin. I did all the forensics inside the router to find if this firmware is used on other devices, what is the scope and how bad a malicious actor could take that exploit and make a proof of concept and a post-exploitation.
I'm Antas. I am from cybernews.com. We did some OSINT about the company. We contacted US CERT as well. We've also contacted Chinese CERT, and they did respond once for more information. And when they got more information, silence continued.
Yeah, that was my biggest concern up front when I first did my release is I've never done anything like this before. So it's I try to contact them a bunch of times. I've waited a couple months. It's I've gotten nothing back from them. It's kind of what do I do? So I made sure to document in my initial release to say, hey, I did try all these steps, and I tried to make sure that when I did my initial release, I didn't publish the proof of concept right away to say, hey, here's this exploit that there's no patch for, and now you can have remote code execution across all these devices. So I was kind of a little hesitant. Then when I was talking with Roni, and when he brought in Mantas and Cyber News, I was really glad that they were able to help me with the responsible disclosure process. They reached out to more companies like the certs and stuff like that. So that way we definitely, not only is there increased visibility on the problem, but then also we're really making sure that we've done our due diligence to make sure that people know about this before we put anything out there that could be used maliciously.
That's great.
Yeah,
so that's you've done your role. You've done everything you could, and hopefully we're reaching as much people as possible about this weakness. What's the thought process? How did you come to discover these vulnerabilities?
So I did the initial research, I guess you could say. So I was basically just bored, and I was I've been interested. I love reading about the different like IoT devices out there that people have been like looking into and finding. You read articles about people hacking their coffee maker, their oven, all this weird stuff. So I was like, hey, that sounds like fun. Let's take a look at it. I think that generally speaking, probably security practices aren't as good in IoT devices. What I got initially was a Wi-Fi router, not exactly an IoT device, but that was kind of my mentality. Is like, I want to find something that I can plug into my network, and then probably doesn't have the best security on it, and let's see what we can find. So the wavlink router I started with was one of the cheapest ones I could find off Amazon, because I didn't want to spend a ton of money on something I was going to probably break while I was working with it.
Yeah.
And then I basically just plugged it in, started playing around with it, to try to see what would happen. The press all the buttons mentality is what I was going with. Let's set up as normal. Let's use it as normal. See what calls are being made, that kind of thing. And then after that, I took it apart, found that there was a serial port or a serial interface. I've got the official terminology for it, but basically, you get your serial to USB converter, and it drops you right into a telnet shell in the back end, which uses the same password as the interface. And then once I started going around the files in there, there's a lot more that was accessible in the back end that you could see when you have all the files there versus, what you actually see in the front end. And once you start going through all the files, you find that a lot of them, the main things that you're supposed to use in the GUI is all relatively locked down. At least requires a password to get to. They have their proper authentication page for everything that you would get to if you're just using it normally.
Right.
However, there's a lot of stuff there that doesn't get linked to directly from the GUI, or is kind of hidden, and a lot of that stuff does not have the same authentication chain with it. There's no passwords that are required.
Cool. So you basically just simply got it right there. You were bored, because a lot of the time people say, "Oh, how do I do this?" or "How do I get around?" I wanna do some testing. I want to learn whatever. So all you did is you simply bought a router, and you're like, "Okay, I'll do my own research. I'll discover my own stuff."
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, that's very cool. So then now you're saying that the authentication is very weak, because if there's a session going on, sometimes you're able to log in without entering credentials.
So basically, there's some pages that, and some CGI scripts you can make requests to, that there has to be a session going when the request is made. If that makes sense. In the back end somewhere, the router is checking to see, is there an active session? It says yes. But in the request, there's no sort of authentication parameters. There's no cookies. There's no like authorization header or anything like that. But I didn't really investigate that too much, because of the multiple ways I found that you can get the admin password in plain text. It's kind of like, I could figure out how to do this, or I could just do it myself and log in, with this much easier way. So
yeah, how would you get it? I know in a lot of hack the box competitions and other CTFs, usually the most basic level is you have the authentication handled on the client side, and you're able to read it somehow, whether through JavaScript or through a text file or through the HTML. So this was something like it, wasn't it?
Yeah, so the main authentication page was handled server-side properly, but of course there's this other random page out there that it was asking for your password to make some kind of change or whatever, and that was happening client-side. So you inspect the JavaScript, and you can see there that the password's in plain text. So that was actually only on some of the devices. When we kind of expanded the scope and looked more, that page specifically wasn't always out there. But the other one, well, I guess there's two. There are two different CGI scripts that are used to back up the settings were accessible. One of them just dumps the backup in plain text, which has the password. Doesn't require any authentication. There you go. And then the other one, it downloads an encrypted version of it, but every single version that I found was encrypted with the same 6-character password. So as long as you had that initial password, which is so the way it worked was either there was the page with the client-side authentication, and that had an accessible encrypted backup, or it had the unencrypted backup. So basically, on every device that I checked, it had one or the other.
Have access. So, I know a lot of my friends, they're technical. They're not hackers. They don't really do much with cybersecurity, but they're technical. And what they do is when they buy a router, they go in and they manually change the settings, and they even change the password, whether it's WPA2, whatever. Make sure it's WPA2. Make sure it's long, and they change it. And they're changing the router admin page settings as well. So if one of my friends, the kind of more technical than average user, will say, because most average users don't even do that, get this router and change their password, the admin password of that. That doesn't really make a difference, because you'll always be able to either dump the settings and to see the password, or just see it from the client side and then log in as admin.
Yep.
And then once you're there, it gets worse, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You can take this one, Roni.
Okay, yeah. So basically, at the moment, you can authenticate, or there is like a session. At the moment, you can access the graphical interface backdoor, and you can directly get root access to the router. So basically, it's not direct, like this is not a root access on the whole system. It's inside a busy box, but that busy box, it's what mainly everything that the routers do, like rerouting the traffic, getting set up all the interfaces and everything. And so at the moment you are in, you can actually try to play with the interfaces and actually see the traffic that is coming in and out. Because in the busy box, they added a feature, like a tool called TCP dump, which is pretty famous if you want to do man in the middle or just packet sniffing in general. It's like the Wireshark of the command line. And at the moment, there is TCP dump on all the interfaces on a router.
Beautiful.
So basically, you don't just own the router at that moment, you own the whole network.
Yeah, so it's not a very simple router. The router, and it actually is coming packed with useful tools. So first of all, it has the GUI access with root access, and plus it actually has tools. So it's like you're getting a kind of a hacking router, if you want to call it, because you get TCP dump with it. You also it has a script as well that lets you list all the networks around you as well, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, go for it, Mantas.
I mean, like in theory, not in theory, practically, you could pivot from that network to your neighbor networks.
Yeah. And then, so on that, you're getting access to busy box with root access, and that's running on an ARM chip, correct? I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So what other programs can you run? Can you upload your own hacking tools and run them?
Yeah, actually we can, but it's very limited because the disk space is really limited. So when you want to upload something that is bigger than what the disk space allow you, it will crash the whole router. Right. And we did that a couple of times until we figured out, okay, the disk space is clearly not enough. So we can upload scripts, but we need like to limit the functions and make something really compact. So
they need to be tiny. They need to be optimized. But if you manage to upload them, you can actually do pretty much run it and access the wireless interfaces that's on it and do stuff with them. Yeah,
basically.
Cool.
And just to chime in quickly, circling back to the script that checks the surrounding networks. Part of someone I initially found, there was a whole support page that had a ton of information on it. This is one of the ones that didn't require any authentication for it. It had everything from the MAC address of the router, plus the MAC addresses of every device connected to the router, plus every nearby network, plus, a bunch of other stuff on the back end. But, that's without even having to do any, you don't have to get the password and sign in, do anything like that. If you just know the page to go to, you can check every single router that's out there to see what home network you're on, what other networks are around you, all the devices on it, and just talking about the the level of complexity. Not that any of this attack or of an attack like this would be complex, but I mean that is literally as basic as it possibly could be. It just puts all the information in one page for you, and you can see everything that's around you at home.
Yeah, that's crazy. And then, so you didn't really to access these pages, even the backdoor, because we know all routers have a web interface where you can change settings and all that. This is not within the settings, isn't it? It's you access it. You need to know the directory or the location of this backdoor to access it. Yep. So it's not a feature. It's intended to be kind of hidden. Obviously, not very well hidden, but it's not a feature of the router, is it?
It shouldn't be a feature of the router. So sometimes you do have routers, then you get your router from an ISP and they have this functionality where you can go on, log in on your account and, for example, reset the router or do some other stuff. Yeah. And usually it's done through an SSH tunnel and has some or limited availability or functionality, what you can do, or your ISP do.
Mm.
But this router is not from an ISP, and also undocumented, the GUI backdoor.
Yeah.
And so, it's something unseen, or that shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Or at least it should be documented then that there is this functionality.
Yeah, and maybe an option to turn it off too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, like every functionalities that create like the backdoor actually are like the main, like the core of the router. So basically you can't just remove the file of the router or upload a new firmware. You need like to rethink the whole structure, because they made the structure so the backdoor will stay. And we can't just remove it.
So you can't just remove it if you wanted to. So people can access all the information that James said in a file where you can see all the networks, all the MAC addresses, and all connected devices without authentication. You can also authenticate anyway, even the password is changed, we said, and then you get access to the backdoor with root access. And then the backdoor, you can think of it as a small computer running Linux that with a Wi-Fi antenna that you can actually use as a pivot, because now it's actually a computer. It's not really just a router. It's a small computer with a Wi-Fi antenna, and then you can actually use it as a pivot to do two things. You can first of all intercept all traffic in the network that the users are connected to, because you're by default you're the man in the middle. So a lot of the time hackers run all sorts of attacks to become the man in the middle. With this, you don't really need to do anything. You're man in the middle by default, which basically means you're able to see everything they send, usernames, passwords, websites, cookies, everything they do, really. You can also modify it on the fly, so you can hijack their DNS and send them other places that you don't want them to do. You can inject miners and mine Bitcoin and all kinds of other cryptocurrencies. You could hijack their updates. So the list goes on, basically. You're in the middle, you can modify anything you want. And that's only one thing that people can do. The second thing is this can also be used as a pivot to potentially hack the other wireless networks that's around you. And at the least, just map them and see what's around you. And there's millions of these devices, aren't there?
The first choice, like the Amazon choice, is wavlink.
Like if you go on what seems to be a parent company, that WinStar's company, they say on their company profile, they claim that they export 95 to 99% of their products to other countries. And their annual sales is from $40 to $45 million, and their capacity is from 1 to 2 million pieces. So it doesn't mean that they actually sell up to 2 million routers, but that they probably manufacture and sell from 95 to 99% of their routers, Wi-Fi extenders, and other devices that they make to other countries, mainly US, UK, Indonesia, I think, and some other countries.
And all of these devices are also vulnerable to similar or the same exploits. So the repeaters and all that, not just the routers, are they?
Yep. I initially tested 2 repeaters, plus during our kind of extended condition, finding other devices out there, we found more repeaters and some of their other, I don't know if it's mesh, I don't know what all the pieces are, but it's more than just, the home router that has the same firmware with the same vulnerabilities.
So going back to the implications, so now we're thinking there's millions of these devices potentially sold. And each one of these devices, if they are online, they are at least surrounded by about 5 Wi-Fi networks, sometimes probably more, but I think 5 is a good conservative number. Yeah. And the fact that each one of these can be used as a pivot to discover all these 5 devices. So if 2 million are sold, 2 by 5, that's 10 million devices that you can profile. And then the fact that you can actually run scripts on this, if you run a DAuth attack, you'll be able to disable about 10 million Wi-Fi networks around the world.
Potentially, yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
So you could actually do mass stuff with this.
Yeah. So the first thing we thought with James was oh gosh, we can make a crazy botnet out of this.
Yeah.
So let's say that there is 2 up to 10 devices per network that you can potentially get a botnet. If you go on Shodan and do like a lazy recon and get 1,000 devices, you can multiply that number by 5 or like up to 10.
Yeah.
And then you got like at least a 200,000, 20,000 botnet. Like depending on how motivated you are to spread everywhere, but it's really easy with those vulnerabilities right now.
It's just so many of these devices and so easy to get access, and the access gives you so much privileges. Me and Adrian were talking earlier as well, and he was like, if you take this really dark in a Mr. Robot kind of scenario, if you bypass the power management of it, you can set these devices on fire, and that's 2 million fires starting at the same time around the world. So it's crazy what you could do with IoT and with these vulnerabilities. And it seems like you can just create any device and ship it, and nobody really cares. Which brings me to my next point. A lot of these devices, they get checked electrically to make sure that they're electrically safe. You can't just sell a device that is not, that the circuits inside it are not safe, that can go on fire by whatever. And there's all these sorts of checks. And if you look at the box, you'll see it's certified by all these bodies to make sure that it's, safe with the ways that we're used to. But nobody really checks if a device is actually safe when it comes to this kind of stuff, to cybersecurity or to information technology, even though this device will be connected to the internet, we all know, because it is an internet device. And yet there's simply no checks. And this is being sold in Walmart in America, which is it's considered one of the more advanced countries, especially when it comes to cybersecurity and all that. And they just have these devices on the shelf. You take them, you plug them into your home, and your home is now straight away not secure at all. Imagine if you have home cameras and stuff running on or like home security, one of those systems. Again, that's the whole system compromised. Your actual security system is compromised because of the router you're using. So like this is, I feel like there should be some kind of a regulation around this around the world. What do you guys think?
Yeah,
like
I think
definitely be. No, continue.
Yeah, and especially in this case, like once you, if we're talking about some kind of check out of the factory to look at what the firmware looks like or something like that, if someone had access to look at it, you would find this very, very, very quickly. Like it's basically you list the directory, you see web CMD, this looks kind of suspicious. Like, you know what I mean? Like it jumps out at you once you look for it. And so that's why even just having a minimal step to look at it to see, I don't know who would do it or what it would look like, but just some kind of quick check to say, okay, is this, at least does it follow basic principles? Like, do all the important pages require authentication? A very, very quick check could have caught this. And I think it's evident that either there was no checks done or, this is not a bug, it's a feature by whoever made this initially.
Yeah.
No, those vulnerabilities probably are a bug, but the backdoors. Another question. But I mean, this raises the question, like, is there a need for better regulation, especially like in countries like, look at the Huawei situation. A lot of the countries started banning the company by not disclosing or whatever, like acting
But is that a solution, just banning a company?
I don't think that's a solution. I think the better solution is better regulation.
Yeah, exactly. Get them checked better, because what if the company is just better at hiding this? Because they could have done. First of all, this is just like you guys discovered this because James got bored, he bought the router and he tested it. If he hasn't got bored and tested it, this would have been still used and nobody would have cared. Plus, not to mention the amount of routers that are still being sold right now that we all know a lot of them could already be vulnerable to similar, maybe worse, maybe slightly harder to find weaknesses. So better testing, I think, definitely needs to be done. As a user, what users can do in this kind of situation, like, how would you advise users? What do they, like when they go to a shop, for example, Walmart, and a lot of people feel like when they walk into a shop, they're getting better service than they get online. And that's why they still prefer to go to shops, especially elderly people, which are the people that have the least technical skills. So like, what would be the advice to these kind of people? Like if you're going to buy, you need to buy something technical. What do you do?
So,
I mean, first of all, if you already have jetstream or wavlink router, burn it.
before it burns itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, as Manta said, like there is like two steps to answer that question. First, what if you already have the wavlinks in the jetstream routers? So if you want to keep it, which is highly not recommended, you need like to unplug the router instantly, clean all the computers, try to erase everything and change the passwords of your online accounts and all of your authentication on your machine, because at that point you need to think that an attacker is already on the network. And if you are not technical, it's really complicated to mitigate those issues. Now, if you are a technical person, you can still go to the firmware and try to recode it, but like it's not worth your time. So you can take another cheap routers at $30 and try to look on the internet first if it's exploitable. And if it is not, if there is no known exploits, you can just buy a new one. Now, if you are not a non-technical person walking to a store and trying to find a technical device as a router, how you should choose it. So basically, don't aim for the cheap ones. Try to go to the seller and ask on the internet what people say about the router. Are there any good? Is there any known exploit? So that's a question that no one will actually ask, but you need to ask this question before. Is there already known exploit?
Yeah, that would kind of be what I would recommend. First off, sticking to, reputable brands for sure. Like, I would not get some, personally, especially because I want my high speed internet, right? I would stick to better brands, but even we recently bought, I forget, I think it's Netgear, but we bought a new, gigabit router when we upgraded our internet. I brought it home, and then just for fun, I looked it up, and there was already actually a vulnerability for it. So we had to manually update our firmware. So I think that it's kind of a two-step process. For sure, when you start off, make sure you're buying something from a company that has a good reputation. And then the second one is enabling auto updates if possible. And if it's not possible, to make it a point to regularly check it and update it. Because just because you have a new router doesn't mean it's safe. Just because you have a router from a brand that is generally speaking secure doesn't mean you're safe. And I think if a lot of new ones have the ability to auto update, but I think you should definitely that's probably a couple of the easiest steps on the router side to protect yourself. And then on the flip side, if you're concerned about I guess as like a client or on a workstation on your home network, using a VPN would not that it definitely is less than ideal to have a vulnerable router, but that would at least protect all of your session information, stuff like that. You have your end-to-end encryption, so it wouldn't matter that we were sitting on the router because all of your traffic was securely being transmitted anyways. So that's probably the safest combination of good router, up to date VPN.
Yeah, I agree. The VPN one will probably, obviously, it's not going to prevent, because the exploit will still be there and somebody will still be able to use your router to discover the networks around you. But at least you'll know your traffic is actually encrypted. And if whoever is capturing it will not be able to see your passwords and usernames, because that would be like, that's really big. That's huge. So you definitely don't want that to happen. Why would someone want to do this? Like, why would these companies do that? Why would they go out of their way and risk the reputation of their brand and all that and ship you routers like this?
Who wants to run their thoughts free?
That's a great question. The only other way I could see it being, like, I could see it as them adding it for something for like a support feature. So that way it's like, hey, I'm having trouble with my router. Let's let the company troubleshoot for me. But the fact that it's not mentioned anywhere, and the access issues around it, even if it's an intended feature that was supposed to be used strictly for support purposes, I would say it's nowhere near locked down enough to be used by something like that. If there's no restrictions, if it's supposed to be just like wavlink support that is able to access this, obviously that's failing miserably. And then the access controls around this page combined with all the other information disclosure and the fact that you can get the password, then it really is a bad thing that you have this out there. So I would say that even if you wanted to, if that was the intended purpose, you kind of have to think through, given what this page does, you really want to think long and hard about how you can get here, who can use it, that kind of stuff, the impact of what you're doing, rather than just putting the functionality out there to say, make it work. I don't care how it's done.
Yeah, it's like selling you a car with no locks and saying, well, yeah, if I wanted to fix it, I need to have access to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also, okay, now let's say it's a malicious company, which I don't know, but if I was in a malicious company and I was the one taking like the directives to add a backdoor or not, why would I do that? So that's an amazing question. I think there is like multiple way to answer it. First, right now in 2020, companies are like in a war of data. Everyone wants data on everyone because now we are not selling any more services. Almost every services are cheap or free because you are not buying or using a product anymore. You are the product. Your data is like worth way more. Like your time on the internet worth way more than your life itself. You are just another dot just generating money. So now, if a company has the power to see all your data, even if it's legal, like the company can resell the data to the biggest bidder,
Yeah.
because
Or
it's a really profitable business. And now just let's say the company also work with the government all around the world. Let's like in a big country, on a small country, wants to know what their population do.
Yeah.
For instance, the DOJ, Department of Justice of America, asked not so long ago to remove end-to-end encryption and had the backdoor inside the end-to-end encryption. That's like recent news.
Yeah.
And also the European Union asked for the same thing, add a backdoor inside the end-to-end encryption. So right now it's a war for the data and for the control and at the end of the day, money and power. That's everything that malicious company or government will want at the end of the day. So if I was selling routers, I would definitely add a backdoor just to resell the data because I will be more profitable. No, like basically, I'm not saying I would do
Don't
it.
buy routers from Lupin, okay?
But as a malicious actor, I'm saying as a malicious actor, I would be more profitable to give free the routers and add a backdoor inside than, just for the data.
Yeah. I mean, I actually had, that's about 2 years ago when there was this WhatsApp vulnerability where you could gain access to WhatsApp with a call. One of the biggest questions, and I know it probably is an oversight, but I can't help but think there's a percentage that this was just a better implementation of an intended backdoor or an intended way for people to get in, but have it as a vulnerability. So when it's discovered, it's a vulnerability, it's not a backdoor. And I don't know if WhatsApp done it, but I'm sure there are companies that intentionally added or introduced vulnerabilities or weaknesses in their software so they get access. Which also brings me to Apple. I'm sure you guys heard the Big Sur thing about it. Log in the information about every app you run. It's because of the gatekeeper, which has been around since 2012, but it's only hitting the news now because they only discovered it now. And apparently Big Sur now, the new one, also make like it's programmed in a way that Apple software bypasses VPN and bypasses firewalls. So even if you're trying to do that, their software at the kernel level will make sure that it sends your correct location.
Yeah.
So I mean, I agree. Our data is very valuable, and companies are going out of their way because, like the gatekeeper, I get the idea, I get the point of using it, why you need it. It's a nice security feature, that's cool. But why would you get your Apple software to bypass VPN if I wanted to use a VPN or if I wanted to have a firewall? What if your software actually had a buffer overflow? Then that's going to bypass my firewall. Why do I have a firewall if you're getting your apps to bypass it?
Like we know that since the Snowden leaks, and people know that privacy doesn't exist since the 90s. But like in the 90s, no one cared about privacy or anything. It's at the moment the Snowden leaks came out, people started to think, oh, there is something going on. But
Yeah.
in 2020, nothing changed.
Yeah,
Just-
people
yeah.
don't
Exactly.
care.
Nothing
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah. They still same with the WhatsApp. I thought that was huge, and people will start using Signal and all that more. But no, people really didn't care. They just continued with whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
I think the
exactly.
take on of this video is if you're a hacker and you want to do the world, if you want to be great to the world, then pick up a router or any IoT device or anything really, and just start researching it. That's perfectly legal. You're not breaking any laws by doing that, and you're actually learning a lot. And yeah, it's you'll actually make connections. You'll see people. And you'll practice. So if you're a hacker, that's a great way for you to actually get into the world of hacking and even make a name for yourself. And you'll help the world to make it more secure. If you're a user, then think twice before you buy any device. And if you don't have the technical skills, ask the people that have the technical skills. And in terms of network, make sure you encrypt it. Just get educated on encryption in general. VPNs usually, look them up. We're not going to talk about VPNs for very long. They encrypt your traffic. There's other ways to encrypt your traffic and protect yourself. So yeah, just educate yourself in terms of cybersecurity, because we are using these devices all the time and there's no escape of it. Like you can't just be a Stone Age man and like use an old phone and all that. You kind of have to live with this world. So just make sure you educate yourself with the risks of whatever you're using, with the services you're signing up with these apps, the face apps, the apps that show you that you're getting old and all that. These are all collecting your faces and storing them somewhere. So, Lupin, you said you have. Sorry, I keep calling you Lupin. It's your hacking name.
Don't worry.
You said you made a script that. What does the script do? And what's the name of the script?
So basically, like I did it with James. So the name of the script is Naira, not routers anymore. And basically, that script will go check all the vulnerabilities on the devices, and will tell you which vulnerabilities you can find, like which CV can be exploited. And then at that moment, you can ask to get a remote code execution, or you can get directly a man in the middle to your web server. And I did also the code of a small backend in Flask to get all the response from the TCP dump. And for now, it's only listening on HTTP because we didn't install MMETM proxy to get HTTPS, but it's possible. It's possible.
And so do you need to use the script? Can you use it on remote routers, or do you have to have the router within your range, within your Wi-Fi range?
So basically, if you can ping the router, you can use the script. Like,
so you can use it on any remote router.
Yeah, cool. Basically, if the web interface is open in the wild.
Okay. Cool. So can we get a demo on this or a walkthrough? Because that'd be very cool.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah, so what we'll do is I have the router at my house. I'm connected to it, and then Roni is going to run the exploit remotely from his. He has I don't have my router exposed to the internet, and instead have a VPN so we can get there, because given everything I found with it, I would love to keep it unplugged and not, right? I want to keep it out for other people, right? So he's going to, from his side, run the man in the middle, and then I'm going to create traffic on the subnet that the router's on, with myself just going to different pages, and then all that will be, so that's captured on the router by the TCP dump that's run by the script, and that gets posted back to Roni's web server, so we should be able to see where I'm going and some of the data.
Perfect. So for the people that don't know, both Roni and James live in completely different countries. Roni is going to be able to use this script to remotely hack into the router using the weaknesses that we spoke about. And after that, he's going to have basically access to that router that is at Roni's house, and he'll be able to become the man in the middle, because the router is the man in the middle by default, and he'll be able to see everything that goes through that router.
First of all, I'm starting a web server to later receive data from the router. Then I'm launching Naira, the tool we created to inject a malicious script to execute a man-in-the-middle attack. We will get all the callback to our web server. We can first see that the router is fetching the admin's password from the vulnerabilities we found, and then execute the script. After a while, we are getting data from the traffic going through the router and therefore oversee everything that happened on James's network.
So that's just a simple example, but once a hacker is in that position, like we said in the video, they can do so much more. They can exploit this on a mass scale, they can modify files as they're downloaded and backdoor them, they could serve fake updates, and so on. Anyway, thank you very much guys for disclosing this information and walking us through it. And for everybody watching, thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to stay updated with the latest in cybersecurity.